Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Boobles and Jeff Molesky.
And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, go ahead and kick us off, man.
All right, so this week we've got two guests on the podcast, and they're co-authors of a couple different books. We've got Ted, who is a Agile coach, works with a variety of different clients out there, and then his dad, Keith. And Keith's a professor, has a doctorate in psychology, teaches a lot on neuroscience and in neuropsychology, and they have some really good practices that they've took some science and applied it to Agile coaching. And we want to just dive into that with them today. So thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm a physiologist, not a psychologist, but there you go.
Sorry.
Damn it, Jeff.
Damn it, screwed that up.
But you have a bunch of kids, so you have to be a psychologist too when you're a parent. Yeah, we're thank you guys so much for having us on. I'm a fan of the Agile Wire, and I've watched a number of the different podcasts. I've been listening to the podcasts, especially Joe Justice and Esther Derby and Woody Zuhl, all heroes of mine. And so appreciate all the work that you guys are doing and bringing the good knowledge to everybody. That's awesome.
Thanks. And thank you for creating the books and things that you've done. We've had an opportunity to look through them, and we've seen both of you speak before. And I don't know, one of the things I wanted to dive into right away that when I first saw your talk and I first started hearing about it and I read the abstract, I was like, what are you talking about with the knowing yourself and some of the things about us? Like, is this just like that fluffy, like hippie agile type coaching? Like we're kind of going down this path of like, what's the value to this? And so I don't know, you made this statement, I think, and they're like, knowing yourself is like, the first step in knowing how to work better with people. And so maybe you could just talk a little bit about like, how do you actually do that with teams? Like, how do you get to know them deeper, and how do you help them to know themselves better?
Sure, Dad. I'll jump in on that and then hand it off. One, I also wanted to give you guys a lot of thanks. It's always an honor for me to speak with my dad. He's done kind of the first research on meditation that was published in Scientific America back in the 70s. He's kind of the world's expert on this stuff. So it's always kind of an honor to be with him. And he's the one who really helped me. I was doing Agile coaching. And as you guys know, as all Agile coaches know, Scrum Masters know, it's not the easiest thing to get people to shift their mindset. That's actually turns out to be a lot harder than it sounds. You think you just have this kind of nice thing, nice little process with our roles and our this and our that's. And then there's a lot of resistance. And turns out the environment plays a huge role. The system plays a huge role, individual things that are happening. And so as I was doing these type of shifts, trying to shift people onto kind of more Scrum methodology or Kanban or any kind of Agile way of working, and I was encountering this resistance, I did have a bit of a neuroscience background, and I turned to my dad, to be honest, who has a strong neuroscience background. And I said, it has to be within people. This changes the ability to shift their mindset. We have to figure out kind of more effective or efficient ways, because just telling people to do it and then modeling it and doing all these different exercises and coaching, all that's helping. But we want to give the individuals a way for personal agility. We want to give them something so that they can change the habits. And so that's kind of where this all came down. And so this idea of knowing thyself, a person has to kind of understand, where they are, what's going on inside of them. And we use a method. Dad, you want to talk about the VPK, which is one of our kind of main tools for knowing thyself?
Yeah, coaching ultimately is self-coaching, because in the end, you're going to be coached by somebody, but you got to do it yourself. And so, people can help, and it's great with teamwork. It's great with individuals helping, giving a different perspective and so forth. But the more you know about yourself, and not just kind of you can use different tests. You could use Myers-Briggs, you could use Strength Finders, all these different tests, and they do give you an idea. We've kind of gone back to one of the most ancient tests there is, and it comes from the tradition of Ayurveda in India, a topic I love, so that makes it easy. And it has a very interesting scientific basis where you can look at this kind of test and study it from a genetic or physiological standpoint, and it holds up, even though they did it thousands of years ago. And it kind of breaks down to 3 types that you see, and then there's all kinds of combinations. So there's the kind of what we call the V energy state type. He's your she, very creative, dynamic, enthusiastic, curious, gets on the internet, goes all over the place, changes topics one to the other, talks quite quickly like I'm doing now, and tell I have a little V energy state in me. And then but they're kind of sensitive. Their digestion can be variable. And we look at the physiology. We don't just look at mental, because turns out all these things going on inside you are what's shaping you, shaping your brain. The brain and the gut are connected. So you got to know about everything about the person, at least a little bit. Then there's the P energy person. This is a classic. Almost all habit change books are written by this type. They have great self-discipline, great energy, often athletic. They like to control things. If they don't eat on time, this is the real telltale sign. If they don't eat on time, they get angry, irritable. You heard that word, hangry. It's real. And they knew about it thousands of years ago. So just a few things, you got your V type. If you can just do a few things to help that person, boom, they settle down. The P type, just do a few things to help that person, they settle down. And then there's the K energy state type. And they're the ones that are a little slower, very thorough, very methodical, very procedurally oriented. P's are more goal oriented. If you had questions like the V's would be, why? Why does this happen? I want to know everything. And the P's would be more like, I want to know when. I'm really precise on planning. And the K is more kind of like the how. They want to know exactly what's going on. They're very methodical. And they hold things together. They have a very good nature, and they're kind of the glue that holds a group together. So, there's a lot more you can say about each of these. But just like any kind of assessment tool, and there's so many out there, it has strengths and weaknesses, and they help you know about yourself. So that's kind of the superficial level. We have some deeper levels of knowing about yourself. We've got a new tool we call Value, where you look at your core values. We have all kinds of new tools for self-awareness, neuroadaptability. We're really interested in a person understanding how they can become more of what they want to be. So it's a huge area you're asking, not a simple question. It's sort of the ultimate question of the universe. Who am I?
Do the energy types change when your environment changes around you?
Yeah. I mean, that's so you're asking, how does a person adapt to the environment? And that is huge for one of these types. The V energy type, very sensitive. You start changing things, they love to go quickly onto a new thing, but they don't focus very well. So you have to create a very strong routine for them. You have to really create a lot of support that they stay on topic, because they're so creative and so enthusiastic. The P's will take over everything if you don't watch out. They just love to take charge. So you got to calm them down a bit. And in a tough environment, if it's a stressful environment, they will step up to the plate and do everything. A K is not as adaptable. That's their one area. They don't like change. Whereas the V loves change. The K is like, can't we just stick with this? I like it. It's okay. I don't want to change. And it takes them a lot longer to change a habit. And from our point of view, everything is about habit change. If you want to change an individual, you want to change a group, you ultimately got to change their habits. So you got to know who they are. You got to know how to do it. Ted can say more about that.
Well, yeah, and it's basically in agile coaching, in any kind of coaching, as you heard my dad talk about this V, P, and K type, immediately your mind goes like, oh yeah, that could, I know that and that person and that person. One of the more striking ones is like, as a parent, if you're a P type parent and you have a K type kid, you're on point, you're getting everything ready, you're super structured, and this kid is just going super slow. You're like, what's going on? Why isn't the kid like me? And it's not because everybody has their differences. Everybody's unique. And so when a coach is working with different people, they might expect people to be just like them. And it's so clear, this agility method, and just follow these steps is so easy. But for your V types, they need something changing all the time. For your K types, they need some energy kind of pushed in there. They need to kind of feel like, oh, this change isn't going to disrupt my whole world, things like that. So knowing these different things gives you an advantage. And again, we wrote these books to kind of help with habit change, to make it more holistic and more effective. Because you can get people to change. It just takes a long time. And you'll see in a lot of different transformations, they get some group, some section of the company to do something, and then the rest of the company kind of wipes it out, and whatever work you've done as an agile coach or scrum master gets annihilated. So that's not a pleasant feeling. And so how do you build on the individual level, the team level, and the organizational level the right environments to kind of support habit change for all three levels?
So that's what I was kind of curious about. Like when I think about change, I think in particular, like I'm a fan of the ADKAR model. So awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement, and just kind of that bridging each one of those areas. When I was looking at the book, I forget which one it was, the total
Brain coaching.
Total brain. Yeah. Like there's everything in the kitchen sink inside of there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? And a lot of cool shit too, like the gut and the brain connection, understanding your energy levels, like a lot of the stuff that you were also talking about. That's super cool. Like I'm really into that, and I would love to dive down more later on. But taking something like ADKAR, which is pretty simple, right? These 5 acronyms, I can quick throw it out, and you can kind of wrap your brain around it really quickly, versus something that is really more encompassing what you guys have got out there. What I guess where I'm going is, more isn't necessarily better, but I don't know, because I haven't, I've just looked a little bit into the book. But what I'm curious about is if changing people is already difficult, right? Like showing up to the daily scrum on time sometimes is difficult, right? Like how do you bridge that gap for people that are like, really, you want me to read this whole damn book to help me try to change direction versus just a little bit to get started? How do you start that conversation?
Well, yeah. So that book is kind of a meta system. So it's very holistic in the sense of it has these 7 different areas. And from those, you have different tools, and then you create protocols. And we created this as like an open source system so that different people can create their own protocol. So every different coach will have it's really meant, that book's meant for coaches and scrum masters. And so basically them reading that book will help them figure out what are the right tools that they want to try, what experiments that they want to do. It gives them kind of a playing field so that they can kind of, and we have a couple protocols in there. We have a couple protocols on the website that we've been testing with a lot of people, and we've tried to figure out what's going to be the most effective one. And so we use the VPK thing, but other people could use Myers-Briggs or Strength Finders as the tool for that first principle. And then there's 7 different principles, harnessing your neuroplasticity and your gut-brain axis, the power of attention, rhythms, this feedback matrix, and also the kind of integrative piece, and then celebrating. So we do, people as a coach, you go in there and you figure out which protocol you want to use. And as I said, we offer 1 main one, 2 main ones. And then basically you start to experiment and figure out what's going to work in your situation for your group of people, because it is very contextual. Depending on, yeah, go ahead, Ted.
Well, and this has come up before. It's a good question, and it's one that others have asked. And so the new book we have out, Self-Empower, we've created a couple more tools that are a little simpler. Because, like Ted said, we gave everything in this one book. But now people are saying, like, do I have to do this, and this? It's too much, So we've narrowed it down. We have this new tool called Value. And it a little simpler, vision, awareness, learn, unify, experiment. I mean, much easier, kind of more agile oriented in a way. Now, once you use this first tool, which is a lot easier to use, if you want to use the second tool for habit change, which is, the total brain coaching, that's there for you. And they are complementary. So, and there's even another tool we're doing, Vector, which is looking at from a perspective of a whole company. So we got this question. You're right. We need to simplify, and we're doing it.
Gotcha. Part of why I was wondering, I just finished, like this type of stuff is very intriguing to me just personally. Anything that's backed up by science, I really enjoy reading. So at the end of last year, I sleep, Why We Sleep. I can't remember the doctor who wrote that book, but it's super, super fascinating. And that opened my eyes up to like how important sleep is, more important than your exercise and diet, because it's more foundational than that. That led me into a book called Breathe. And
that's a great book.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, I was, and that actually, because of those two books, I found out I have a snoring problem at night. I had no idea. I mean, people can't necessarily see me, but I'm a pretty fit dude, or at least I like to think so. And I had no idea that it was affecting my lifestyle so much. And I literally just got the Sleep Neuro system. My wife got it for me as an early birthday gift. So we're going to give that a try to see if I can stop this stuff. But then I just, I'll finish this ramble in just a second here. I just finished reading Code Breakers, Walter Isaacson's new book about the CRISPR-Cas9 system. And then that led me into Hacking Darwin. Jay Metzel, I want to say, he's on the World Health Organization ambassador. So anyway, why I was going to bring that up was you were talking about those different energy types, I think VP and K. And you had mentioned, okay, you can kind of do these things that help settle them or kind of move them a little bit, help them out in some type of direction. And I was kind of curious, like, is that a nature or a nurture type thing, right? Like, are they born with this disposition to be this type, or was it environmental? Sorry, go ahead, Keith.
No, that's a great question. It's I just wrote a series of articles, 4 different articles this year. One was on the microbiome and these energy states. Another one was on the genetic basis of these energy states. And then another one was on epigenetics and these energy states. And the final one was on something called neuroadaptability. So I'm like hot on this topic. I just love this stuff. And ultimately, it's both. You're born with a set of genes. And if you wanted to, live longer, I mean, it's going to be determined a lot by your genes. I mean, there are people 95 years old that are smoking, staying up all night, doing anything they want, and it's ridiculous. And then there's people, in their 50s and 60s that are in a huge gut crisis. They can barely, eat anything. And so it's both. The genes are really important, and there's these energy types. If you look at there's a whole field called Genomics, which is this connection between Ayurveda and genomics. And you can see there's a lot of good studies which show that there is a very definite genetic basis to these types. And years ago at Harvard, there was a guy, Sheldon, who did this thing, ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph, based on the different skin types. A very similar idea. So genetics is huge, but nurture is everything. I mean, every experience you have changes your brain. Everything you do changes. And what happens in early childhood is huge, huge, huge. So your brain has been shaped so many different ways. Your body has been shaped. This gut-brain axis is huge. It's not just the brain anymore. It's how the gut and the brain communicate. And, you take antibiotics as a kid, you eat this food. So many factors are affecting you. It's insane. So you can't just think, okay, I'm going to get better by doing this mental technique. Because what you eat actually has a huge effect on every part of your genes. It's all epigenetic. Epigenetics simply means you can turn genes on and off without affecting the basic structure of the DNA. So the DNA has all these genes in it, and they can be flipped and on. You just eat one food, flips on one gene. Eat another food, flips on another gene. You sleep well, these two genes turn on. Don't sleep well, these two genes turn off. Everything we do affects these genes. So lifestyle, habits are huge for your life, for shaping your health, your sleep. Exercise makes a difference. People go through life thinking, oh, I can do anything. And you can when you're young. You can basically do anything. But you start getting a little older, or if you're a little more sensitive, and there's so many toxins in the world today. There's so many environmental stresses. COVID, everything else. You really need to strengthen up because, you need to get in balance. One of our key points for individuals, for teams, for companies is balance. You're out of balance, not much is going to happen. You need this kind of inner coherence, inner balance to give you the strength to be adaptable in the world. So everything is about how you can adapt to the change, because if you can't, you're doomed. Agile, what is Agile? Agile is about adapting. That's basically what it is. If you can't adapt, that's it. So you have to be fast. You have to be capable. And what's happening inside you is determining it. How you see the world, your mindset, that's based on the wiring in your brain. If you got some weird wiring when you were a kid, you're going to have these cognitive biases. You're going to look at things different than everybody else. How you going to communicate to the next guy in your team if you're seeing things through these glasses and he's seeing them through these other glasses? So you need to focus. Nobody likes the idea of changing. Nobody likes the idea of having to take on all these different things, and you don't have to. You can do one thing about Ayurveda and total brain coaching. And a lot of habit change people, they say, start simple, one habit at a time. Maybe you need to drink more water, figure out a system. And we have a whole thing about habit map, a habit plan. We have all kinds of ways, which are actually similar to some of the big guys out there that are going through habit change. But you need, like what you're doing with your sleep is huge, very, very important. So you're changing a habit in your life, and it could make a huge difference for you in your work, in everything you do. So, maybe we're a little too holistic about everything, but how can you not be? It is nature versus nurture. There's no way around it.
Habits are hard to change for people. It seems like whenever I'm working with teams and individuals and systems, like you coach them, you give them feedback, we're working through something, and then you leave, and they tend to go right back to what they were doing beforehand, especially when a stressor comes in.
Right.
But what I heard you say this, and this really resonated with me on in your previous talk, that it's much easier to create a new habit than change an existing one. And maybe you could talk about like why that is and how you apply that, because I guess in retrospect, as I was thinking through that, like that's really been true, and I think it's a really valuable lesson for coaches and scrum masters out there.
Yeah. So basically, you have an ability, it's kind of everybody's superpower,
Adaptability.
Plasticity. Yeah, neuroplasticity. And basically, you have this ability to change. So every new experience creates kind of new connections within your brain. And so if you've created an older habit, we use this kind of analogy of a highway and kind of a road. And so the highway, if you've been doing something like waterfall for 30 years, it's created a highway within your brain, and your whole system is built upon that. And if you just decide like, oh, I'm going to stop doing that today, that's not going to probably go down that well. That's like, it's not going to work out that well. You're going to constantly come back to that when you get tired and stuff. You might try these new kind of, let's say this new road, but unless you get a ton of reinforcement to say that go this agile way, you're going to come back to that highway. So the whole point of the system of Scrum and Kanban is to kind of get you moving onto this new road and create this new habit, which then the resources that you normally would put on the highway starts to go to that new road and build it up. And that then overtakes the highway, and the highway becomes abandoned. It becomes the small road, and this new road, the agile road, becomes the highway. But it takes time and energy to do that. And especially, you realize we usually get into this cadence of doing things again and again. Once we find something that works, we just go with it. And we're not kind of aware of how that's structuring our own brain a lot of the time. And the environment has a tremendous effect on that. So if you're in a company that's super command and control, and they're telling you to be agile, and you're hearing from the Scrum Master, you're hearing from these people like, oh, Agile's the way, we're going to empower the team. But the only people that are getting sort of promoted are the ones that are super command and control and taking charge and being the hero and all the things that your coach is telling you. Maybe that's not going to be the way that our team is going to build into something great. Mm-hmm. You're probably not going to listen to your coach, because you've got this huge environment. You've got the highway, you want to go up, and you're not going to do that, just by listening to this one guy. You have to kind of see what the overall structure is. So the point on that is, it's very hard to just dismantle an old habit, to stop smoking cold or something like that. It's much better. And Charles Duhigg and BJ Fogg and James Clear, all these, habit gurus, they're all saying the same thing. You have to kind of create these new habits. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to figure out how to create a new habit, which is going to replace that old habit. And you have to start really small and start to build that and keep reinforcing that as much as possible. And we have kind of four different levels. So we do it on the self level, like self-coaching, like journaling or your app or whatever, getting a coach, personal coaching, having a partner, having somebody who's right with you, where you set up some kind of cadence and they keep reinforcing that new habit, getting into a group like a team, or joining a club, or getting with a group of people that is going to help you move in the direction you want to. But the most important one is the environment. If you want to stop snacking, take snack foods out of your house. It's like that. Some people say, if you want to get in great shape and lose a lot of weight, move to Denver, because everybody there is running. If you go, we lived there for a little bit, everybody's doing something outdoors all the time. So those kind of levels help you reinforce those new habits so that you can replace your old habits.
Yeah, this a little bit reminded me. I think I've said this before, but when I first joined the Army, when I went the basic training, I remember the drill sergeants would say something to the effect of the hardest person to train to shoot is the person who knew how to shoot a gun coming in, because they had to unteach all of these bad habits that they had learned. But one of the other things that you would maybe think about was, it's been a long time, but also in the military, I was what they called a resilience trainer. And what the Army had found is that they call them warriors until you graduate, then you're technically a soldier. But these warriors that were coming in, they were, feeble's not the right word, but weak mentally, weak physically. They would literally be getting shin splints, breaking bones, just running, just trying to take the physical fitness test that the Army demands of you. If they put on a rucksack, right, their hips would break from the pressure of wearing a backpack with 40, 50, 60 pounds in it. So there was the physical weakness of people coming into the military, but then there was also the psychological side. basic training is meant to be stressful, right? It's to break it down so that you can build you back up, so that when bullets are flying overhead, you have the mental resiliency to continue moving forward. You're not breaking down in those stressful situations. And they were finding that even warriors coming in, just getting yelled at would cause these soldiers or these warriors to break down a little bit. So anyway, that's the context for the resiliency program. It was to try to help build these warriors up both physically and mentally. And when we were thinking about those habits that you were talking about earlier, I forget the model. I think it's ABC. It's something like the activating event, your thoughts around it, and then the consequences of it. And it's really to make you in the moment, like try and analyze, hey, something just happened and I had a response to that, right? Like the example we used to use is like you get cut off on the expressway, right? You're driving down, all of a sudden somebody cuts you off and you immediately have a reaction to that. Your blood pressure goes up, you grip the steering wheel harder, you get frustrated. And it's in that moment where we try to teach you to like pause. Hey, why am I feeling this way? What was my initial reaction, so that you can stop, analyze it, and start to build the new reaction that you want to have. Instead of getting pissed off and flipping them the bird, you say, hey, maybe they're in a hurry and they just need to get somewhere, or whatever the case may be, to help you try and build some of those new pathways. I think that's what you were talking about there, Ted. But is that about right?
Oh, Dad, we can't hear you. You want to pop off?
This is definitely, at least my favorite topic, resilience. We call it something a little different. We call it neuroadaptability. But ultimately, stress is unavoidable. It's out there everywhere. And you kind of question, well, hey, I can handle stress. Well, can you? That is the question ultimately, because you can push the challenge level up, as happened to you. And you test, can you handle the stress or not? And what we don't realize is how powerful stress affects us. Mm. We don't realize that not only does it rewire your brain, so you start looking inside the brain of people that have been overstressed and you look at their neurochemistry, you say, okay, fine, it's good for you to react, and it's good for you to react quickly. A snake is there, you better jump out of the way. That's good. Okay. But now when that's over, what happens? Is that snake still there for the next day, for the next 3 days? What's happening to you? And it's that kind of ability to come back to yourself, as you were saying. And people have talked about it. They've used the word mindfulness as an expression of what that means, that, you're mindful. But that's slightly absurd, because a snake is there for you to be mindful. That has to be already built into your brain. You can't just intellectually say, hey, I'm not going to react to the stress. By the time that's done, you're bit and everything's over with. It's kind of mood making. So you want to create that state, but you want it to come naturally from the inside. Now, stress, when you keep stressing a person and they don't recover, it's not good. Cortisol levels are high. These cortisol levels, when they're high in the brain, they damage parts of the brain, the hippocampus, which is controlling your emotions and your memory. It's this high levels of stress all the time, depending on the person, but it'll actually not only affect the wiring. So now, when a challenge comes to the frontal cortex, you don't react to it quite the same way. Challenge comes to the amygdala, you overreact because that's your kind of stress center. So that's one level. The other level they're just finding out is that there are molecular pathways, not only neural pathways, but they're molecular pathways, which have to do with, again, genes being turned on and off. So at the most fundamental level of your physiology, stress is causing abnormality. And if you're stressed over and over again and you don't figure out a way to deal with it, you get all kinds of problems. It could be digestion, could be high blood pressure. And then people go to addictions. And addictions are another universe of insanity because, again, you're changing molecular things in the brain. So you take an alcoholic, you take a cigarette smoker, you find, if you look at the deepest level, you find genes are being turned on and off in a way that's not that easy to come back from, as people know when they're addicted to things. Maybe it's gaming, I'm addicted to gaming. It's coming back needs a lot. So we're really into super habits. Okay, now what's a super habit? Well, Charles Duhigg in his book talks about keystone habits, one habit that can have side effect of improving other habits. It can be almost anything. For some person, it could be getting up in the morning and saying, this is a terrific day. That's BJ Fogg's Maui habit. It's kind of a super habit. Ted, can you think of others there?
Yeah, so like things like gratefulness, love, meditation, these are all kind of super habits. One that we're really focused on in Self-Empower and some of the other books is the learning habit, like taking everything, so interpreting it as a learning experience. And this goes into growth mindset and fixed mindset. So taking every challenge as, okay, I can learn something from this rather than I got to like shut this down or I can't talk about this. Those are kind of the super habits we're talking about.
And the big one that I've spent my life studying is meditation.
Yeah.
And particularly transcendental meditation, which was, when I was in the 70s, that 60s and 70s, that kind of emerged at that time. And I got my PhD thesis on it. And we've got, in our university we're at, $25 million worth of NIH money to study its effect on blood pressure and all kinds of other things. And I just published this paper on neuroadaptability. And the most powerful result of people meditating twice a day is resilience, or what we call neuroadaptability. In other words, they react to the stress and they don't think about, I don't try to be emotionally mindful at that time. I just am. Mm-hmm. I'm more in the present. I react to the stress. And after the stress is over, my blood pressure just comes right down again to normal level. Cortisol levels come right down. So there are techniques you can use. And, the one that I've studied the most is this particular meditation technique. You can use these techniques to literally change the rewiring on a neural level and on a molecular level, because you see genes changing with meditation too. You see a whole new set of genes, so that you can actually get a person to naturally react better, to naturally have more resistance. They use this with Army veterans. It's 2 big papers came out recently, PTSD. I mean, that's the extreme where, they just don't let go of the stress. And I don't know if that happens in a company. Maybe it does to some extent.
Oh yeah, it does.
Maybe it does to some extent, And so PTSD is just sort of the extreme version of what everybody's going through. And they are able to recover much more quickly practicing this technique of meditation than otherwise. So it's very hard to intellectually or mood make these things. You got to rewire the brain. So you need a super habit. Mm-hmm. Super habit you do over and over again, and it rewires the brain. You look at the EEG, you first begin to meditate, all of a sudden you get this amazing coherence in the brain. One part of the brain is now connected to the other. And then you meditate over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you begin to see, you put them in a stress test and they begin to react differently. So habits are meant, we think about a habit, you exercise, that's a habit. Well, it's building muscles. Well, this is kind of a building the brain muscle for resilience. You do it over and over again. You just make it a habit. I meditate 20 minutes twice a day. Boom. After a while, that brain muscle of resilience is there. And then I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, I'm in the present now, and therefore I react, which is crazy. I mean, it happens naturally, because that's the whole notion of kind of all these years when people talked about self-development and everything. That's what people want. They want to be able to be dynamic, but they want to be in the present. They want to be able to be the greatest warrior in the world, but they don't want to have PTSD. They want to be able to react, but then come back to a state where they can enjoy their family, be at home. So you could go to the work, you're working hard, you're like crazy, but then you got to shift back to another mode when you come back home. Anyway, Ted, I'm sure you have something to say here.
Well, it's a good point. It's when you get into that stress state, obviously there's the fight or flight response. And so you kind of narrow down your intelligence, your vision. You're trying to get out of that situation. And then when you relax, you start to use more of the brain capacity because you basically turn off your frontal cortex, which is a big part of you figuring out a more holistic solution to things. So if you're reacting to a stress and then you're not recovering, you're still in that, the decisions you're making after that are in a more limited view. And in Agile and when we're working with software teams or HR teams or marketing teams, whoever we're working with, when we're trying to respond to the things that are coming down, the deadlines that are coming, but then we want to go to this mode where we're using all of our brain capacity to kind of figure out what's the best solution that's going to give our customers the best thing. We don't want to be in this kind of, you get into that putting out fire after putting out fire after putting out fire. The solutions that you're generating are limited in scope. They're not holistic solutions. And that's why you're not able to kind of crush the marketplace, because you need that full brain capacity. You need everybody on your team operating, everybody in your organization operating from that level if you want to get the most holistic and best solution for whatever problems or challenges you're dealing with.
Yeah, we said this word a few times before. I just wanted to bring this up. So a lot of times people talk about resiliency, but I think about anti-fragility. Like I'd much rather have teams be anti-fragile, where they can handle many different things, or things make them stronger. And I think that's what you're talking about, the super habits. Like these are the things that are going to make you stronger as you do them. And I guess I was thinking back to, Scrum teams I've been on, and I was thinking about earlier in my career when I was first becoming a Scrum master. I was told you need to protect the team. Like, don't let them see all these stressors. Like you need to, separate them from those things. And that actually made them weaker, right? Because then they weren't learning from those things. They couldn't take the whole system view like you were talking about there, Ted, like because they only had their myopic view of what was actually happening. And I think that's maybe a good lesson too for teams out there. Like you need that stress, then you need to get stronger from that. And how do you do that and not go down like, the personal thing is like go down to some addiction or something that's a very negative way of working or being, and how do you use that to get stronger? And I think that knowing yourself, what you've talked about a lot of getting in balance, is really important there, so that you understand like when those triggers are happening, so you know where you need to recenter yourself or rebalance yourself.
Yeah, and I would say addiction is more a systems failure. It's not a personal failure. I wouldn't go down that road. I would say somebody has a traumatic stress, and their brain and their body's just trying to figure out how to deal with that. And if they don't have a way of getting at it, then the brain physiology creates this way, whatever they're doing is giving them that little bit of relief. But and the problem is a lot of times they're shamed for those type of things, and then that creates more stress, and it doesn't lead in the direction we want to go. So it's good to look at those things from a systems perspective, and get people, if they're in that. And neuroadaptability is, we talk about it as can be used for good or evil. So like it is the thing that will take you down that road of addiction if it goes the wrong direction, or it can take you to that super warrior stage where you can quickly look at work with the stress, whatever the situation, handle it fast, and then come back to that resting point where you can then operate at 100% of your brain capacity kind of thing.
And a lot of it also is communication, because if you're on a team, if you're on a Scrum team or something, then ultimately it's how you communicate with each other. And if one person is, Vata and talking all the time, and the other is kind of Pitta trying to control, and then when they're out of balance, these are the Ayurvedic terms, P energy or V energy. But if they're out of control, things don't get done. What happens, to really create a team is giving people a perspective of who they are and letting them look at everything from different points of view. I mean, I like paired programming because I think that probably helps in that sense. And that you suddenly get a kind of empathy. I think everything that's in Scrum is actually part of that. Just things like a stand-up, the reviews, all the different things that are done are kind of, interestingly enough, designed to help balance each type. I don't know how they figured it out, but there are a lot of good things in there which are important in a team. And, we know that a team doesn't, Google figured out with the Aristotle thing that you don't have to have the best people make up a team. In fact, diversity is more important. Sort of like the gut microbiome. Sorry, I like that topic, but diversity is everything. So you need diversity. So if you don't, but the diversity means then you've got to have those lines of communication. And people have to be balanced. And they don't even know what that means. So if you can create that unity in a team, that coherence in a team, both individually and as in a group, it will excel no matter what the diversity in it. It doesn't have to be you pick this one and pick. It's good to have a little variety. If you have all pittas, they could just turn on each other. These P energy types can get very competitive and ambitious. They could just turn on each other and go nuts. Or they could work together like a super athletic team and just be fantastic. But you throw in a little diversity, it's even better. It kind of creates somebody's creative, somebody's more procedural oriented. And I think Scrum and Agile really, the focus of those systems are really to improve adaptability, to create some internal coherence so that you can be stronger. And I think what you said is right. You can't protect them. I mean, that's not the right idea. The idea is to make them stronger so whatever the environment, that team can handle it. Because who knew COVID? I mean, come on. It's just the case in point. We're all, some people did fantastic. Other people just, it was tough. And everybody talks about it, So that is the essence of everything, is this kind of adaptive leadership, that you're empowering people to work together better. First of all, they understand themselves. Second, they have a perspective of who's in their team and organization. And third, that they really focus on these channels of communication, making sure that, you're not hurting people's feelings, you're not command and control, that you are empowering. You're really helping each person grow. And that environment is the kind of ideal environment, which Agile, figured out, but then putting it in practice is a bit challenging because there are different circumstances. Like Ted was saying, if you get a command and control at the top, the C level, it just crushes everything. And it's just a kind of fake Agile. It's not a real Agile. So same in the individual. You can fake it, but you don't want to do that. You want it to be real. And that means you have to put a little work into it. Not a huge amount, but you actually got to take some responsibility. I'm not a victim. I'm not going to guilt myself out or shame myself out. I'm actually going to take some responsibility and say, okay, you're right. I have to make a few changes. Maybe it's your sleep, maybe it's your exercise. And you start making those changes, and then you can contribute more. And then you as a leader are a better leader because you are clear, more empathetic. I mean, empathy is huge. You look at Microsoft. I mean, Satya Nadella, he just went to this company, started, with Agile, and then he's just transforming this whole company to be more empathetic. I mean, who ever thought in a million years? There's a real top psychologist, Brene Brown, that talks about vulnerability. And she goes to all these, Silicon Valley companies and talks about vulnerability. I mean, when in the history of the world did that ever happen? So people are becoming more aware of how important it is to self-empower people, self-empower a team, self-empower a whole vertical level of an organization. So it's all working together in a coherent way.
Yeah, I know. So I haven't done the VPK with teams before, but I've done, the Myers-Briggs, just different
Sure.
things like that. And for me, one of the things is like, I know we've made an impact and they finally get it when they start talking about, oh, that person over there, they're a D, so we should probably approach, them this way.
Yeah.
We should give them those facts very straight. We need to be very concise in how we talk to them, and maybe they're coming at it from more like a K type, and so like that's a different for them. And when they can start using that and they start talking about, oh, I could have did this better because of this person's personality type and they would have wanted to hear it this way. That self-awareness, I think, is a big thing too, right? Like that's a whole nother trigger. I think like that's like the first step when you're working with a team is for you to start seeing that self-awareness that you were kind of just talking about there, like the vulnerability, the empathy. Like when you start to hear that coming out and you give them a language to talk about that can be a very powerful thing for teams.
Yeah, we have this value tool. We start with vision and vulnerability. So it's good to know where you want to go. It's good to have an idea of where you want the team to go at, a certain point. If you have a vision of the finish line, that helps. And that comes by understanding, a lot of it comes by understanding your core values. What is it you care about in life?
Mm-hmm.
What's your real intention in life, do you want to be a multimillionaire? Do you want to be a, real family person? Who do you want to be? And where is that in your list of priorities? And then when you do that, when you get this vision, then you get a sense of your vulnerabilities too.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next step is awareness. And we talk about awareness. So this is V, then A. So we got a shorter acronym here. We tried to figure this out. And then you got the A, so you're looking at self-awareness, which, like you said, I think is huge, and the world is coming to that conclusion. And then adaptable. That just, again, what you said. So we've already covered those. And then you've got L, which L is an interesting one. Listen and learn. So we know learn, that's learning a new habit. What's listen? I mean, I love that. What's the guy that does that TED, the advice?
Michael Bungay Steiner, the advice monster. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. He does this wonderful thing about how, a coach is always trying to give advice. And it's like the absolute wrong thing to do. First of all, he says, you listen to the person and then you instantly want to give advice, but you haven't really even heard what the person wants. It takes a while for them to actually get to their real problem. And so, that's listening is important. But now listening, there's, the new book Chatter, there's a million things out there where people are talking about self-talk. What's going on inside you?
Mm-hmm.
And, are you encouraging yourself or are you discouraging yourself? It's kind of like a growth mindset, fixed mindset. And that internal dialogue is also really important. You got to listen and figure out. And if you have to make a shift, you got to do some things to make that shift because it's just not working for some people. They just keep criticizing themselves and wasting energy. It's just like an enormous waste of their own creative energy. Mm-hmm. And then the U stands for understand and unify. So you have to kind of comprehend how you're going to fit these new habits into your life. It's not always easy. You have to kind of look at the big picture, how you're going to fit it in, and unify it so it becomes, and you need feedback. You cannot do things unless, if you're going to lose weight, you better buy a scale. I mean, it's just simple. If you're a diabetic, you better get your blood tested. It's just kind of like basic learning. And then finally, E, which is probably the most important one in value, is experiment and evolve. So experiment is pure Agile. I mean, that is just, okay, this doesn't work, try another experiment. That doesn't work, maybe you try a habit, it just doesn't work. Maybe you try something with a team, it doesn't work. You just don't get discouraged, you just keep experimenting. And evolve, has many different meanings, but it just means that you're growing. and that you get this kind of learning agility. This is Ted's favorite topic, learning agility. You can go into that, Ted.
Well, I mean, you kind of covered it. Learning agility is just that kind of ability to go into any situation, and it's just like a muscle or a habit. It is obviously a habit. It's basically, I'm in this situation, something's coming to me, it doesn't work out, the experiment doesn't work out the way I can try to hide that, or I can try to say, oh, that wasn't my fault, that was somebody else's fault. Or you can take that responsibility when you fully go into it. And Chris Avery has that responsibility process, and that thing is so powerful because you can get through life through shame or obligation or denial, or you can do that. Lots of people do it. But when you take responsibility, that's when you get that maximum learning. And that's why it's so powerful for people to just take it, not because they have to, not because you have to be responsible, but you want to be responsible because you know by being responsible, you're going to learn the maximum amount from any situation that you're in. It's one of the reasons why it's so powerful to empower teams, because if the leadership, the high level leadership, are the people responsible, they're the ones that are learning the most. But in an organization, you want everyone to learn. Let's multiply our learning capability as an organization. So let's push that empowerment. Let's have the people, on the teams be responsible, because they're going to learn at a maximum level. And that's all going to filter back up too. So that's part of that. So getting into learning agility, you can, of course, build that by trying new things, by looking at things from different angles. So like today, we're talking about neuroscience, we're talking about military, we're talking about, agility, we're talking about Scrum. We're looking at things from multiple angles and seeing where's the path that we can find. We're learning new things are coming out of this kind of mix of whatever we're throwing together here. Epigenetics with, the daily Scrum. How does those two things fit together? It's a pretty far stretch, actually. Yeah. But that's where you're going to learn the new knowledge. That's where you're going to see the new things. That's where we're all right now we're using learning agility. And you want every team member to kind of be in that mindset of having that. There's a lot of tests and other things on that whole topic that we could go into, but it's a good topic.
I just, a couple weeks ago, finished the book, Think Again by Adam Grant. It's his newest book. And it's exactly what I was thinking the whole entire time, is like, it's learning agility. Like, that's what he's talking about. Yeah. It's the whole book. It's the whole example. It's like changing your mind multiple times and not being like, it's black and white, it's gray. I think that's what we talked a lot about here, is like finding that balance between things in life. And I don't know, just another resource for those out there. Like, it's a great book. And I think it gives you a little deeper topic, or how it's applied from different, in different lenses. So this was really great. Thanks for coming on. I do have one quick question. This is kind of a fun question. Like, I just was thinking about, Keith, your wife, Sam, is, co-wrote the book with you, and you have your family get-togethers. Like, what are they really like? Like, I can only imagine like the topics that come up when you're all together.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's maybe one of the most rewarding things in my life, is that my children are my best friends. And that when we do get together, my wife and I, with the kids and the grandkids, it's really fun. I mean, we don't just talk about neuroscience. Nobody talks. We talk about life, but we have a shared experience. We're trying different things. And I would say, believe it or not, even among all this kind of critical thinking or whatever, I would say the biggest motto in our family is to have fun. Don't do everything, whether you're pursuing enlightenment, whether you're pursuing your career, whether you're pursuing your family life, be happy and have fun, because otherwise, it's sort of a waste of time. And so that, I think, pervades a lot of our get-togethers, which are very dear and precious, really.
Yeah, Dad's amazing at letting go. Like, we'll write whole pages, chapters, and he'll just be like, "Well, do we really think this is it?" It's like, "No," and then he's just like, whoa, and we're all just like, it's like, how could he just let go?
Well, for me, like right now, I'm in Florida, and if I can get out and walk on the beach for 15 or 20 minutes, 3 or 4 times a day, then I can do a lot. Because you were saying this idea of kind of being present, the ocean does that. You're sitting there on this huge beach and looking out at this ocean, and you're like, it's cold. It's a little colder here, so that's good because there aren't as many people. It's kind of cool, actually. I'm in northern Florida. But it's really, that helps. I think you need to find things like meditation, walking in nature, having fun, doing things that really, you need those breaks in life to get recharged. And then suddenly you're some ideas very confused, and then it just becomes clear. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, when we, as a family, we've tried very much to focus on, enjoying each other as much as we can, and creating situations where we can talk about topics like enlightenment, but at the same time, then we can joke around and have a lot of fun, so we can switch back and forth easily.
One of the fun things is like my son, 13-year-old son, Kieran's reading the Coherence Code, which is kind of more of like,
it's a fable, right?
Yeah, it's a business fable. And there's a moment in there where they talk about this samurai warrior, Musashi, who he tried to get enlightened through combat. That was his kind of thing. And like every time he was getting tested, he was putting his life on the line. That was the technique that he used for. So my son just read that chapter because it's one of the things he was reading. And he said, so what'd you get out of that? And he's like, well, Musashi, he was in flow all the time. That's what you're trying to get your teams into flow all the time. Is that right, Dad? And I was just like, oh, you got it, dude. That was so good. And it's just fun to I know when Dad and Samantha wrote that and I was like in the mix there, that was the intention. And then to see my 13-year-old son get that out of it was just like, oh, your heart just kind of goes, yeah, that's good stuff.
That's awesome. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, is there anything the two of you want to plug or promote to our listeners?
The Agile Wire is a great podcast. And we are coming out with this book on May 14th, Self-Empower, and that's got the value framework that we just talked about. It's got we've had the pleasure of working with some amazing people, Pat Reed in California, a lot of different Agile coaches. We just got to talk to Richard Sheridan from Joy Inc. And so a lot of those kind of great learnings that we've gotten, and it does kind of get into how do you apply habit change on the internal level. So how do you self-empower yourself? How do you build this learning habit? How do you build neuroadaptability? So yeah, we could plug that book. We're excited about it. It's been, we've had a lot of collaboration with a lot of different coaches on it. So it's got a lot of perspectives.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.